Evening, everybody. Let's give it a minute as people continue to join here, and then we'll get started. All right, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight as we talk about a development proposal for 1309 West Belden, an unusual lot for sure, given its extreme length and former life as a railroad right-of-way. Um, I am Brian Pellrine. I do zoning and development for Alderman Hopkins, and with that, I will pass it over to him to make some introductory remarks before we get into the presentation and Sheffield Neighbors Association introduction as well, and then we'll also do some typed Q&A after the presentation. With that, Alderman Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Welcome, everyone. I appreciate your participation and your interest in this project. I know there's been a lot of interest that has circulated in the last couple of days, especially, and that's fine. You know, this is an engaged community. I wouldn't have it any other way. I would ask for those of you that haven't made up your mind yet to try and keep an open mind. Some of you have made up your mind and you've communicated that to me, and that is certainly your prerogative. But I do have to express this basic principle for any property owner anywhere in the city of Chicago. If they seek a zoning change or if they seek a variance through the Zoning Board of Appeals, or even in some cases, if they seek a permit, which is incumbent upon us to consider whether we issue or not, they are entitled to due process. And tonight's meeting is simply to provide that for them out of a sense of fairness. It doesn't mean that any decision has been made, and it doesn't necessarily mean that this is a track to approval or denial. It's simply one more step in an open, transparent public process that I, as the alderman, would grant to any landowner anywhere in my ward that was seeking to do a development deal. So that's why we're here tonight. We're going to assess the proposal that you see. This is a new one. I know some of you are familiar with the history of this parcel and with some of the proposals that have been offered over the years. This one is different. And there may be pros and cons to this proposal that were not present in the previous iterations. So that's why we're soliciting neighborhood feedback. That is a very important process in my decision making. I take my neighborhood seriously, and I take your opinions very seriously. So we're going to use tonight to gauge that. No decisions will be made tonight, but we will keep the lines of communication open in the following weeks, so you can continue to engage and tell me what you think of this proposal, and see if it passes muster with the community. So with that, I will introduce it to Brian Comer from Sheffield Neighbors Association, who's going to help us moderate tonight's proceedings. Brian?
Thanks, Alderman Hopkins, and thanks for co-hosting this meeting with us. I want to welcome Jeff, Tom, and their team to this platform. You know, one of the responsibilities of a neighborhood association is, as Alderman Hopkins already mentioned, is to bring people together in the community to discuss new ideas. And we always appreciate doing that in concert with the Aldermanic office. And we are looking forward to this presentation as much as we are looking forward to the questions that you'll present, hear the answers. And as the Alderman said, this is the beginning of the discussion of this proposal. And I look forward to the coming slides and discussion. And I want to thank everybody for logging in and attending this important meeting. And with that, I'd like to introduce Tom Raines, who's the attorney for the development team. Tom?
Hi, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Alderman Hopkins. Thank you, Brian P. My name is Tom Raines. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Thomas R. Raines, Attorney at Law. We've been engaged to prepare this presentation for a zoning amendment. We have not prepared or filed that amendment application yet. We've reached out to Alderman Hopkins and his board office, and we've discussed some options. This is an option that we've come to, and he suggested we present it to this organization tonight. And so with me is Jeff Lowe from Compass. He has his own group, the Lowe Group, and Patrick Harrington from PFH Homes. Patrick has done some development in the area, notably over on Webster at 1310 to 12 West Webster. Just finished an 8-unit building on Clybourne and 2435 North Block, and he's done a project at 925 West Montana, which was 5 units. And so I will share my screen and show you some elevations to begin with while I describe the proposed project. But before I do that, I think I'd like to share basically just the site plan for the entire parcel. And I have to make a turn here to do that because of the way it's laid out. So here I'm going to share my screen, and this is I'm going to, Brian, or can you, okay, so can you see the screen here? I'm not, let me just.
Yeah, I would go
Yes.
landscape
Yeah.
though. Might be
Yeah,
a little easier.
I'm going to. I just have to twist it. I just had to make sure it's sharing because I can't see it in double mode. So I am going to rotate this view and give everybody an idea of this entire parcel. And if you, I will try to zoom it once. We may lose some area, but this is probably about as close as I can get. So on the left side of the screen here is Belden, and this is facing north. This is east. This is west, and the rear of the property here is south. And so combined, this entire parcel is 19,228 feet. And what we've done here, as you can see, we've split it up. It's roughly 42.25 feet wide along Belden, running west to east, and running north to south. It's 455 feet in length. The proposal here is to take the front half, which is the north half here, and let me kind of zoom out so we can fit the whole site plan in here. It's this parcel here to be developed, and the balance of this parcel as it sits today, which is here, which is approximately 9,700 square feet, would remain open land and would be donated, whether it be to a community group, the adjacent landowners, or some other organization, and that's something we can discuss further. But that would simply be donated as a community benefit, and the development would move forward on this site plan. And so with that, I'm going to change the view to go back to the first page of this presentation and give you the elevation from the north. So what you're looking at now is the proposed project and the north elevation, as if we're standing on Belden looking south. This is the north elevation. And so proposed is a 4-story, 6-unit building that will contain 2 units on the first floor that are duplexes down, so first floor and lower level, and there'll be 2 on the first floor. The second floor will consist of 2 units, both 3 bedrooms, that are single floor units, and the third and fourth floor will be 2 units that are duplex up. Moving on to the side elevation, this gives you a little better idea of the sitting and the current alley situation and the building immediately east. And so the current zoning for this parcel is RS1. The proposal here is to go to RM 5.5. RM 5.5 would allow a 1.7 floor area ratio, which would give roughly 16,163 square feet of buildable square footage on this parcel, of which this development only proposes using 11,747 of that. And so I'll give you an overhead view of the site plan. And as you can see, um, this is Belden on the left on the north. Here is the residential structure comprised of 6 units. Here is open space in the rear here. And we're proposing providing, hang on one second here. Um, for the rear setback, we're proposing 111 feet of rear setback as opposed to the required 67. And so there's quite a bit of open space here. There's a 2-car garage here, and then there are 2 4-car garages with a courtyard here. As you can see, this is a approximately 4.4 feet 4-inch walkway that would go along the east side of the property. And you can see that here in this more dimension site plan, which I'll zoom in a little bit. And then if anyone would like me to go back or forward, I'm happy to do so. Just put it in the chat and Brian can tell me um, verbally what he'd like to do because I'm doing this. I can't see the chat, but this gives you an idea of the placement of the building. The front setback would be 25 feet from Belden. You know, 4 feet 4 inches here. It's essentially on the alley line, providing about 7 inches of setback from the alley line. And then again, here is a substantial amount of parking for 4 units, which include this 2-car garage, a trash enclosure on the alley side, basically a courtyard here for vehicle access and to both garages and the 2 4-car garages. Here are in a rendering and floor plan of the basement portion, which would be the duplex down of the 2 units on the first floor and lower level. And you can see they're pretty ample. The combined square footage for the first floor and lower level is 3,293 square feet. So that makes up the 2 units on the first floor and the lower level. And moving on to the first floor, this is the upper level of the duplex down units. And this is the combined square footage for the lower level. And this, like I said, is 3,293. Moving to the second floor, there are 2 bedrooms or I'm sorry, they're 3-bedroom, 3-bath, and there are 2 units all confined to the second floor, which is made up of 2,738 square feet. And then we go to the third floor plan, if I can click it here. Third floor plan, these are duplex up, 3rd and 4th floor, and they provide a rear deck as well. The living space is on the 3rd floor and the bedrooms are on the 4th floor. And this is the roof deck. And there's a stair enclosure that comes out on the top. And here is the elevation with dimensions that was shown initially in the initial rendering. And you can see the height is 47 feet, and that is measured to the flat part of the roof. And then there is a parapet, and then there is a roof enclosure. So roughly the height of the building, including the setback enclosure area on the roof, is roughly somewhere in the 56-foot range. But by zoning standards, this is a 47-foot high building. Here's a picture of the I'm sorry, I believe this is the west elevation. It's designated the east elevation, but I think it's Patrick, am I correct? This is the alley elevation on the east?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I'm sorry, on the west. This is actually the west elevation. That's mislabeled. And then here is what would be the east elevation. This is the rear elevation from the open space provided by the garages. And then here again is the site plan that we looked at in total. And this just gives an idea of the site plan for the various areas split. And again, the buildable site area is 42.26 by 225, and the balance of what will be the open space donated to the community would be 42.26 by roughly 230. And so, as I mentioned, the request would be to go from the existing RS1 designation to an RM4. I'm happy to answer any questions the alderman, Brian or Brian, have for us, and I'm happy to address anything you'd like us to address from the chat.
Thanks, Tom. So I would ask that anyone on the call that has a question, please type it in. Tom, I'll start with a couple, and this is based on probably some of the questions that have gone around with previous iterations of this property and just sort of what people have been talking about now. Do you have an image showing your elevation compared to the existing elevation facing Belden?
I believe that was represented in the initial renderings, the first two, and let me go back to those.
Only because that building to the east I don't think really looks like the buildings that are actually there. The one to the west does across the alley.
Okay, so I don't. This is what we have. We could
Okay.
easily get that.
Okay. Yeah. I think that would be helpful to just give people an idea of what they're looking at
Okay.
straight on, just the different height elevations.
And can you also address the trees for the existing Lakewood homes? You know, there's some overgrowth of trees in the backyard. Have you looked at that, and what would be the impact there? Would you be asking for tree trimming or tree removal from the Lakewood homeowners?
I'll defer to Patrick on that.
That'd be tree trimming only.
Trimming only. Okay. All right. Thank you.
We have one question in regards to emergency vehicles. This alley is obviously L-shaped. Do we know the status of emergency vehicles being able to access, I guess, the entire alley from either entryway?
The CDOT address here would be Belden. There were iterations of a development plan which included townhomes and homes along the south portion of this entire property. Chicago Fire Department, namely John Javorka, really couldn't figure out a way to say with confidence that they'd be able to access with full service vehicles. This would be the same as any sort of house on Belden, so that this would be accessed from Belden. I do not believe there will be a emergency response issue with this the way it is.
Okay.
We have not confirmed that with the fire department, but I'm highly confident that this would be serviced in the same way any sort of home on Belden would be.
Yeah, we will request an updated survey
Sure.
from the fire department, since this is substantially different from the previous plans that, you know, were problematic because the equipment couldn't get all the way down the alley. So, so we'll get an updated analysis from the fire department on this.
Great. And then, Tom, can you repeat the zoning change request? There's
Sure.
a question.
It's
just for
currently an
that.
RS1 that it was downzoned to years ago, which basically doesn't give a lot of uses. We're seeking to go to an RM 4.5, which would provide floor area ratio calculator of 1.7. We do not intend to use that. In fact, we'd use a relatively small portion of that And we would do it as a type one, meaning we would submit our plans in conjunction with the zoning application, and we would roughly be at 11,800 feet of the allowable 16,100. And for those of you who don't know what a type one means, it means the plans we put forth for the zoning amendment are the ones we're bound by, even though an RM 4.5 would allow us 16,100 square feet of buildable area, we would only build 11,800 of that. And we would be bound to that.
Yeah. I addressing the garages. So there's one 2-car garage. Is that going to be accessed from directly on the alley?
All the parking is going to be accessed from the alley, save for the 2-car garage is directly off the alley. The other
Right.
two garages face each other with a courtyard, which is accessed off that alley.
Right. Okay. Perfect. And then the what we would call in Chicago a gangway. Can you between the proposal and the building to the east, how wide is that?
4 feet 4 inches.
Let's
Okay.
go with the site plan on this one. I think that's much more to scale.
Okay. I'll give you this site plan.
Yeah, yeah. The rendering's nice to get an idea.
No, I know, but I was going to detail what it was just so we could see kind of, I don't know about you guys, but I got old eyes. This is kind of tough for me, but here.
There's a few comments about how the gangway looks almost as wide as the alley on that rendering, and I have to agree. But the site plan is to scale, which is good.
Brian Pelrine, is there an average width of a city gangway?
That's a good question. I can say anecdotally, 4.5 is pretty generous,
Mhm.
That's
especially
a
for
big
for
gangway.
this neighborhood. Yeah, I mean a standard city sidewalk is 4 or less, I believe. So
No, it's a little more.
Okay.
is it?
Well, remember sidewalk cafes, we have to, or you're talking about in
No,
residential.
you need.
Resident.
I'm talking
Yeah.
about residential. You
Yeah.
need
Okay.
6 feet of
Yeah.
clearance on a
Right.
commercial corridor, but
Exactly.
right. But yeah, a standard. When I say a standard sidewalk, a residential block
Sure.
sidewalk. Yeah.
Okay. And so then the difference in height, Tom, between the top of, let's just call it the pergola, and the actual inside ceiling would only be 9 feet, 47 to 56.
I'm sort of ballparking that, but I mean, if I'm off by a couple inches. But yes,
Okay.
I mean, if you could see here, they're going from the flat portion to 8, almost get you all the way up. That's 8.5, and then it looks, if you're just scaling this thing, if this is roughly 6'4", this is probably not a foot, but let's just call it a foot. So,
Okay.
so 47 and 9. But that's set back, and that's a smaller portion of the roof.
Mhm.
Uh, I give you an idea on the plan. Well, this plan doesn't have it. You can see it on the elevations, how deep that is in the building
Mhm.
from the lines of the building.
Okay. Next question. Will the new building block the sight lines of 1321 West Belden towards downtown from the roof?
1321, which would be immediately, I don't know, is that the immediately
What?
west separated by the alley?
That might be my best guess, if
Yes,
not
would
like,
have to be.
yeah.
Like I said, we'll provide you with the height of the adjacent properties.
Okay.
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head.
Okay. Then we have a number of comments and questions about probably, I'd say, the most unique portion of this plan is the undeveloped parcel to the south.
Correct.
So, one question is, uh, who are you actually going to donate? And you mentioned it at the start, but what are you sort of thinking? I mean, because unless something's changed and the alderman can address that, I don't think the park district's gonna
The park
take it
district
and say, yeah,
cannot
right, yeah,
take it. The park district can take a minimum of 2 acres. So
right.
I just went through this in Fulton Market. We donated a park. And it was a park we donated for the community. It's not a park district park. It's not maintained by the park district. There was some agreement with providing some infrastructure to that area. It was a little different than this, but we do understand that there's a need for some open space here. This
Mhm.
is a relatively substantial piece of open space. It's 9,800 square, it's 9,700 and some change square feet in the middle of a pretty dense residential area. Um, I know people have been kind of enjoying this area, this open land for a period. And so I thought a good compromise was providing more than half of it as a balance to the community. We welcome any input from the alderman's office, from your group, from the adjacent neighbors. And we would like to provide this as a community benefit.
Okay. And who owns the long contiguous property right now?
It's all owned by a group of three men. It's the same people that have owned it this 20 something years.
Okay. Okay. I'm just running through everybody's comments and questions to make
Sure.
sure we hit everything.
There's a good one. There's a good one here, kind of asking again about what a type 1 is. So it's
Yes.
if the zoning change is granted and then for some unforeseen reason the development stalls and the property changes hands, does to a new developer, does it revert to an RS1 and do they have to reapply for the zoning change?
The alderman can sunset it really almost whenever he wants by just filing a zoning amendment. A type 1, I believe you have 2 years to obtain your permit from the publication date. I believe it's 2 years. There is some time period.
Yeah, so to answer that question, yeah, I think that the question was more about, like, you answered it correctly, Tom. The question I think is about if there's a change in ownership, can somebody else build the same building? And the answer is yes, if it's within a certain amount of time, and only if the alderman doesn't sunset it to its original zoning.
And I'll point out when we do file a type 1 zoning amendment, there are floor plans. A lot of times there are materials, there are colors, there are window placement, there's site plan design. That's all in stone. So whatever is presented and approved as the type 1, that is what has to be built. So that's to say, okay, you got a type 1 at 11,747 feet, and we decide to sell it to somebody else. That doesn't mean that they can put in some modernistic building with 2 units that's also 11,747 feet. It's got to be 6 units. It's got to be represented the same way, a brick facade. It would also have to be the same open space. It would have to be the same unit count with the same square footages, up and down duplexes as presented. And so there is no flexibility with respect to what can be built, even if a development team were to change.
Yeah, and I will just say in my experience, and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's rare for a type 1 deal to get through the approval process and then be sold
Yeah.
before, usually the person who negotiates all the details of a type 1, does so with the full intent to follow through with the deal, not to give it to someone else. So in this case, there's no negotiating here. It would be a type 1. It's a non-starter to think otherwise. And I would expect that if we do get to that point where we get consensus that this is acceptable to move forward, I wouldn't accept any transfer. I would expect that people who make promises to the community, keep those promises, and I wouldn't entertain any other options. So this would have to be a type 1, or it's not going anywhere.
Understood.
Tom, an additional question about the unused portion of the parcel and working out who that could or would get donated to is a whole other topic. But would the development team would they actually build the park? Are they planning on that?
There is
Or,
there is no plan to do that. They would donate the
okay.
property. Um, I'm sure they might be willing to participate in some way. But
Hmm.
that at this time that the, you know, contributing a 9,700 square foot piece of land in the middle of Lincoln Park is substantial.
Sure. Another question here, the total unit count, just to repeat that, it's 6.
Correct.
In past proposals, there have been light and shade studies that were completed. One, is that something that's already been completed? And if not, is the team willing to do one?
To my knowledge, it has not. I can get back to you with that answer.
Okay. Okay. A number of comments and or similar questions to one of the first questions we had answered with regards to emergency vehicles. And the alderman addressed that that is something that they would get confirmation on, whether the emergency vehicles can fully access the property, because this proposal is very different from the ones that have been presented to the community before. Um, is the proposed building aligned with the 2 adjacent to the building? If not, why?
We don't know the answer to that.
Yeah,
That is one of the follow-ups we'll provide.
yeah, okay. Um, will you improve? No more about that. Okay. What is the proposal for lighting on the eastern exposure for privacy concerns for residents on Lakewood?
I think I don't know that there's a plan in place. It's certainly a topic of discussion we would be willing to entertain. I don't think there's any reason for over illuminating that area. One thought I had was maybe uplighting, and that was one of the things I thought about, maybe uplighting along the east line toward our building. That way,
Hmm.
nobody would have anything shining in their windows, meaning ground uplighting from the easternmost line of our property across the gangway toward our building.
Okay.
To me, would
Uh,
seem the least intrusive and still provide illumination, for public safety and for private safety of the residents.
Thank you. And then there's another question, but I'll rephrase it a bit. Does this proposal require private dumpsters for garbage collection, or will they be part of the traditional Chicago streets and sand?
I'll defer to the development team for that.
I can take that one.
Private.
Yeah, it would need private, and and the dumpster enclosure shown would be for the private dumpsters.
Yeah.
Anything
Okay.
anything over 4 units is required to be private.
Okay. And Brian, maybe the office is best to answer this next question. Can we name another community, or in this case, street in Lincoln Park, without an alleyway behind the homes? I'm not expecting you to answer it off the top of your head.
No, not off the top of my head. Obviously, we all know this is a pretty unique situation, but
Yeah.
it's also not unheard of. There are plenty
There's a
of
bunch in Old Town.
Yeah, there are plenty of Old Town is a great example, and that's also in our ward. So obviously, I'm familiar. There are a lot of places in the city and in our ward, even more specifically, that um, do not have access to any kind of alley, and in fact, back up to other developments. So that they certainly exist. I don't have specific examples at the moment, but it wouldn't take me long to get any if I needed to.
Yeah, I can't think of any either. Although I can tell you that in the near future that will change. The residential section of Foundry Park, former Lincoln Yard site, does not have alleys. So
All
um,
right.
there you go. It can be done.
I can chime in a little bit on that. Hi, everybody. The 1200 block of Wrightwood, the majority of which does not have alley access. The 1800, 1900 blocks of Howe and Orchard and Burling, most of those have front driveways, which this doesn't actually. The nice thing about this development, even though it's a low density neighborhood already, which is great, one of the best things about it, but to have 10 garage spaces for 6 homes is a nice bonus as well.
Mhm. Okay.
200,
More comments
200,
about elevation, which Tom, I think will help once we see that elevation comparison.
Sure.
Um,
got the 200 block of Eugenie. Just throw that out there.
That was the other one I was thinking of.
Oh, and the 14 and 1500 blocks of Wheeland and North Park.
What about Orleans? I don't think Orleans has them, does it?
Anyway, sorry, go on, Mr. Comer.
No worries. If the project was approved, what do you estimate the timelines being for completion?
Well, our zoning, our entitlement work would probably be a total of 3.5 to 4 months, and then from there, there's permitting. I'll defer to Jeff and Padraig.
It would take about a year for construction, start to finish.
Okay. Obviously, more questions about even remediation of the unused land to the south. I think that's sort of been answered in the sense that it's going to be um, turned over legally to another entity. How do we get to the park? Well, the next question is how do we get to the park from Belden?
Walk right down.
So I guess that would mean if it was space that was open to the entire community, um, where would you see that public access coming from? I guess maybe that's a better way to ask that question.
They could do it from the southwest. There's access off that block behind, and they could also walk down the alley off Belden.
Okay, but not the walkway in between the homes and to the east. Okay.
I don't think that's currently the plan, at least in the rendering, and I'm happy to reshare it. It shows it cutting off with access to. Am I sharing still? Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. Let me close out of this and let me get to that page. Here, this is probably a good. See the concrete walk
Mhm.
comes to an end at this last garage on the south.
These houses.
Totally. This is it here.
Okay.
And it kind of dead ends there. And goes up, makes its way to Belden here.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't necessarily be an access point. I don't know how great of an idea that is, especially if I lived in these properties to the east. I know that you want a bunch of people walking through that gangway. I think that's typically going to be an access point for residents, but there is going to be an alley here, and then in the rear south and southwest, there's access off that block immediately west.
Okay. Where are the HVAC units planning to be located?
They would all be on the roof.
Okay. Will the width of the alley change from the present width that our cars now drive on?
I don't think we could if we wanted to.
Yeah, yeah.
I've got one. How does this compare to the building on Webster that sealed off this right away? It was built maybe 15 years ago. I think a lot of the same people were involved here. How does the building size compare? Just for context for people.
You mean?
That would be 1310, 1312 Webster.
Yeah, that site was 60 foot wide and it was like 120 foot deep. So it was wider and shorter. So the building was much wider.
So the building's wider.
Yeah,
Is it also shorter than what's being proposed here?
it is shorter, yes.
How much do we know?
One story.
Approximately.
About one story, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
This question is for the Aldermanic office. Would these drawings be made available?
I don't see an issue with that, and we are recording this meeting as well, so we'll have that posted for anybody to go back and view it if they weren't able to attend or they want to see a detail that was missed live. But yeah, I don't see a reason that we couldn't share these drawings as needed.
Okay. In this question, next question, Tom, I assume they mean the entirety of the building from front to back, but does it need to be set back so far from the sidewalk?
Is it required to be set back that far?
I'm just reading it verbatim
Yeah.
and
Uh,
assuming it means sort of the frontage of the building. So,
Um, I don't think that is required for the front yard setback. It's like 8 feet required. We're giving you 8. I mean, we're giving you 25. Um,
mhm.
I mean, typically this is kind of a bonus for a community. They like a setback. If they would prefer it closer to the street, it's probably something that could be done. But no, 25 feet is not required here.
Okay. The next question, again, asks about emergency vehicles. It also asks if it's going to inhibit people's ability to get in and out of the garages. That absolutely could never be the case. But as the alderman said, they will get uh, the answer to the emergency vehicles, and a new study will be done based upon these development plans because they are different from the previous. Um, these renderings, okay. Okay, so there's a number of comments, and I guess we'll bring it up just as a comment to the panelists. But I also think, to be fair, Brian Pellrine addressed this and asked them to go off the site plan. But there are a number of comments regarding misleading renderings. And so I believe every time we have talked about exact measurements, we've come back to the similar image that we're looking at right now. So,
Well, what I can give you that is an exact, okay, these are the architectural renderings with respect to the elevations, and the floor plans are exact. So here, these are exact numbers here in terms of height
yeah,
for this building. In terms of adjacency, we will put that together. But in terms of what's being presented here, the color renderings are just based on the architectural and are not to scale. These, in fact, are. So this will show you exact heights here. And so these renderings are specific.
yeah.
Okay. And the site
And I think
plan
for the
is
most
the
part,
site plan is
you go,
specific, but you have to remember this is relatively preliminary as we sit here today. And if this should advance some, we will undertake, the light and shade study, the height of the adjacent properties, lighting, we'd address the lighting along the east line. Those are all things that, are relatively expensive, and we're quite in the preliminary stage here.
okay.
But but
Next,
but but given
go, sorry, go
these are
ahead.
a fair representation of what this will look like and what the scale is.
Okay. Um, Next question, would the undeveloped parcel remain RS1 zoning? I think that probably would
Completely
be
up to the
determined
element.
by, yeah, and whoever ends up
What we did in Fulton Market is that
managing it.
DPD wanted it POS, park open park space, which they would
Okay,
probably suggest here, but we'd leave that to the alderman, because if you leave it RS1, someone could develop it. I mean, probably
right.
not going to happen. Someone could develop it, one of the RS1 uses, some of which aren't so pleasant.
Okay. Another question about maintenance of the donated portion of the site. That's a discussion that would be had later, but um, Tom did mention that the development team would participate in that, but it's not something that they're planning on taking on themselves 100%. Are these condos or rentals? And they ask how much they would cost. At this point, I think it's probably too early to estimate that, but would these be condos or rentals?
They would be condos.
Okay. Do you have an idea of the price point, or is it too early?
Probably 1 million to 2 million, something in that range.
Okay. Uh, is the builder going to restructure the electric pole location and move the transformer? This was a big issue with the fire department.
No, I would not need to.
Okay.
I'll actually chime in on that one real quick. ComEd is looking at moving the poles in this alley completely unrelated to this project. So that's just, I'm putting that out there. I'm sure that's going to invite a number of more questions from people that I'm going to have to answer tomorrow and the rest of this week. But there are some issues right now with how close the wires are to certain properties, and they are actually currently examining moving all the poles anyway. So just an FYI.
Okay. The next question is about private dumpsters impacting trash collection and congestion in the alleyway. I think it would operate the same way any other combined alley with private collection and streets and sand public collection operate.
Yeah, we have many alleys in our ward operate exactly that way. It's very
Yeah.
common.
What is the finished material of the garage? The elevation that faces the donated land should be finished similar to the front elevation, so the garages are not an eyesore. So it's kind of a question with a comment on the end of it.
They would be finished in brick, same as the building.
Okay. Um,
Question here about roots of the trees. I believe this is the trees in the backyards of the neighboring association, but maybe I think I'm interpreting that question correctly. Any any concerns there, and how would you protect those? How much digging do you have to do?
No idea actually on that.
Yeah, that's probably kind of a wait and see, but you would do what you can, of course, even if that is something that goes under onto this property.
so we are still getting a lot of questions and comments about the donated property. Um, as we've mentioned a couple of times, that's something that's up for discussion on who it would be donated to. Um, so there are no specifics on that, but it's essentially a portion of this property that the owner, the new owner, would gift to whatever entity agrees to take it.
Yeah, if you don't mind me chiming in, we've talked through
Yeah,
that.
sure.
Talked through that. Because I don't live within Sheffield neighbors, but I don't live far away at all. And I've been through a number of zoning meetings like this, not nearly as many as you all have, but I think that one of the things to focus on is it's almost 10,000 square feet of space that's being given the community. And Sheffield Neighbors is a very active community. Perhaps they would want to be involved. Perhaps it's just the neighboring 100 people. St. Joseph's down the street. I mean, their playground is Belden Street in the afternoon, right? So they've shown some interest potentially being involved too. I mean, so I think there'd be a number of entities, and I don't think it wouldn't take a lot of money. It would take a little bit of money to get it going, but to maintain 3 city lots, basically, that wouldn't be particularly expensive. I think you'd have a lot of people really enjoying this space, and I don't think it'd be hard to raise that money just to keep it a nice private park for the immediate community, if that's what they end up trying to do.
Yeah. An additional question to that, which is sort of on the other side of that coin, is what would the process be to determine where or to whom the property would be or that land would be donated to? Will the neighborhood have any vote in this determination? there will certainly be a discussion about that because there will be responsibilities of whatever organization or combined organizations take ownership of that to maintain it.
We
So,
envisioned starting with the neighbors, and then that's where we envisioned it.
yeah. So, yeah, same with me. Yeah,
Especially the
I think,
adjacent neighbors that are most,
yeah,
especially for sure. That's where we thought the conversation would probably start.
yeah, yeah, and that seems reasonable. Um, okay, so a comment combined with a question. Uh, Many of the attendees on this call are currently communicating with one another and are irritated only the softball questions are being answered. Will the developer and alderman commit to addressing all these questions? To be as the person actually reading through all of these comments and questions, I think we're doing a pretty good job in summarizing all of them. A number of them are addressing the same issue, and I don't believe I've avoided asking any particular question. But certainly, if one is missed because there are over what 100 and almost 110 questions or comments listed, I am certain the aldermanic office will address these publicly after this call.
Yeah, if you feel like you didn't get a satisfactory answer on this call, certainly feel free to reach out to us directly, and we'll either get you an answer or get you to the right person who can answer it.
Yeah. And that's been the same with all of these types of meetings that we've had in the past. So nobody's afraid of answering any question. In fact, we'd prefer to have them asked now and addressed now so that there are no surprises or um, situations where we would say that, something wasn't addressed. Um,
And we are gonna cut off at 7 o'clock here, so I
yeah,
think maybe if there's
I'm
any
just
new,
scrolling down to
I'm
see
looking
if there's
for any
new.
topics we haven't addressed at
Yeah.
all. It's a question about if the owner gets any tax break. I think that's a good question.
Does the owner get a tax break if they donate the property? I'm not a tax attorney, so I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know why that would be germane, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
I think it's a fair question. If we could find out, that would be helpful.
Yeah. Um, One question. Would the developer consider not making the building so tall?
I mean, it's certainly something we understand the question and we'll take it under advisement.
Okay. Again, another comment about remediation of the donated land and the train tracks. Again, I think that's a topic about this plan that would happen after this type of meeting. How much space would be between the alley and the property? Right now, the alley is 16 feet wide. How many inches or feet gap would
7
be
inches.
between alley and building?
7.
7? Okay. Um, What would the lighting look like for the parking, not the parking lot, but that courtyard for ingress and egress to the individual garages, the one-car garages?
Motion.
It would be like the height of the garage doors.
Okay.
Face. It would be in the alley and they would face each other doors.
Okay.
It wouldn't shine over on the neighbors to the east.
Okay.
Going back to the topic of some concerns about the renderings. Is there, Tom, you kind of alluded to a plan to maybe update some of those and tighten them up. Is that something that you can commit to and that we can get out to people? There's a few questions about that.
Sure.
Yeah, I think generally like the renderings were good for showing the building, but not so much the context with other buildings. And there was some kind of weird inaccuracies related to spacing and scale that I think are very important to people. So we would love to see a little more accuracy on that.
Here's a good question. Is there a gate planned for the garage courtyard?
Not,
Had-
not,
Haven't decided yet, right?
I haven't decided yet.
Okay. Um, and so, are there, oh, this is a good question. Um, Rooftops on the garages, rooftop decks.
And none
Is-
whatsoever.
Okay.
The nice thing about this lot is because of the green space in the back, it didn't seem like it was necessary to put decks on top of the garages.
Okay. And I think this is something that would have to be verified, but it's a general question. Brian Pellrine, you'd probably be the best person to find the answer to this, but would this be the tallest building in the neighborhood? And by how many feet?
No, I don't need to search at all to say that it would not be.
Okay.
I mean, I guess define specifically the neighborhood, but there are certainly plenty of buildings that are taller than 50 some feet. As you pan out a little bit on the block, yes, it
Mhm.
would be the tallest building.
Yeah, I think
Surrounding,
residential is what they probably meant.
sure, yeah. That would require a little more study. It's certainly among the tallest. I would, if we're just talking about the residential side streets in this immediate vicinity. But I would be surprised if it is the actual tallest, but it's probably among the tallest. We'd have to do a little look into that.
Just to follow up on the garage rooftop, if it's a flat roof garage, would the new owners, once you, the developer, were out of it, would they be able to then build on top of that
No, it wouldn't.
as an association?
It wouldn't be a flat top roof. It'd be a pitch roof.
Pitched roof. Okay, great. And then any of the questions that were not answered this evening, Brian, what's the route the office wants to take into addressing?
Send us an email, please. That's the easiest way. If we know the answer and we just didn't get to it, we'll get that to you right away. If we need to go to the development team to ask for an answer, we'll do that. So um, happy to happy to get people the information so that they can have that all at their fingertips. Like you said, Brian, it's obviously hard to manage 100 plus questions being lobbed at us here in a short amount of time. But I think you did a great job, and so thank you on the alderman's behalf. I'd like to thank you and SNA for doing the moderation here of the Q&A. That's not an easy task. I've done it myself many times. With that, I think we can probably get to some wrap up comments from SNA, from the alderman. Certainly, there are some questions that probably still need to be answered, but we will, we will get to those as we can. If people want to reach out to us, email is the easiest way. So that's office@aldermanhopkins.com. You can put those to my attention, Brian P., and I will work on those as they come in. Um, Alderman, I see that you're unmuted.
Thank you, everyone. I just unmuted. No decisions have been made. Your input is still essential to this process. So thank you for your outstanding questions, for your continued engagement. Please stay tuned, and SNA will remain in partnership with my office as we vet this proposal and see if it passes community muster. Brian?
Yeah.
Thanks, Alderman. I appreciate everybody attending. To have 60 plus folks from our community concerned about a new idea in the neighborhood excites me that many people want to take an active role in this. I appreciate the questions, the comments, and share with SNA just as much as you share with the alderman's office your thoughts on this proposal. As he said, no decision has been made, but this gives us an idea of what somebody's thinking about for that parcel. And as I said at the start, that's our job, to bring people together to discuss new ideas for our community. So thank you so much for your participation this evening and commenting and asking questions.
Alderman, there's one more good question here. I know that was a nice little wrap up, but there's a question about timeline as to your thoughts on a decision on this. And Yeah, I think that's obviously premature because I don't think we have all the information yet, but do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I see no reason to drag this out. We'll try to expedite a decision, but there are a number of outstanding questions that came up tonight. We have to get answers to. It'll take as long as it takes, but I see no need to rush this. But again, we're not going to drag it out either. So we'll make a decision as promptly as possible.
Okay, with that, I think we are set to conclude the webinar here. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And again, feel free to reach out with your questions and comments to office@aldermanhopkins.com. And Brian, what is the best email for Sheffield neighbors?
info@sheffieldneighborhood.org.
Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.